Good day to all distinguished presenters, panelists, and participants. I greet you on behalf of the OECS Director General, Dr. Didacus Jules, and the OECS family, and welcome you to this first in a series of webinars on the Green-Blue Growth Index. The OECS Commission is pleased to partner with the Global Green Growth Institute, Gggi, in this endeavor as part of our strategic partnership and aligned aspirations. Special thanks and mention to Dr. Christine Leeson, Dr. Lilibeth Acosta of Gggi, and Mrs. Joan Novell of the Commission for spearheading this action, and to all our contributors and collaborators. Following the formal endorsement of this Green-Blue Growth Index initiative and the financing and implementation plan in support of the OECS Green-Blue Economy Strategy and Action Plan by the Council of Ministers of Environmental Sustainability in May this year, we are encouraged by the representation of our member states and other participants at today's forum, and we invite your active engagement during the sessions. This month of June 2021 has been extra special. On June 18th, last week, guided by the theme ongoing with integration and with integration for progress and sustainability, the people of the OECS commemorated 40 years of cooperation under the OECS architecture, designed to facilitate solidarity, resilience, and growth together as an archipelago of island states. World Environment Day on June 5th, World Oceans Day on June 8th, and World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought on June 17th, together converged our consciousness to the twin indivisible considerations of green and blue in the context of small islands. This consciousness, captured in the Island Systems Management or ISM framework, has been the foundation of the St. George's Declaration, which proclaims the principles of sustainable development by which human conduct affecting the environment in the Eastern Caribbean is to be guided and judged. ISM recognizes that the close concentration, proximity, and link of island ecosystems, what we call from the ridge to the outer limits of the Exclusive Economic Zone or EEZ, through biological processes, ecological impacts, and human interventions, require a continuous, adaptive, and dynamic strategy, which provides the necessary policy orientation to manage the complexities of these interactions for sustainable development. It therefore integrates and coordinates the decisions and initiatives of all sectors, public, private, and civil society, to ensure the achievement of common goals. In endorsing the latest revision of the St. George's Declaration in April 2020, dubbed SGD 2040, ministers encourage regional and international agencies to facilitate alignment of projects and programs to be in support of and consistent with its principles and priorities. We therefore welcome and commend Gggi's ready pivoting and customization of the generic Green Growth Index to a Green-Blue Growth Index for the OECS, which could also serve as a template for other SIDS regions with similar considerations. As we continue to navigate multiple scenarios amidst our special circumstances and unique vulnerabilities associated with climate change and COVID, OECS member states are persuaded that the effective management of environmental resources at local, national, and regional levels is an essential component of sustainable social and economic recovery and development, including job creation and sustainable livelihoods, a stable society, a buoyant economy, and sustaining viable natural systems on which all life depends. According to the Financing and Implementation Plan for the OECS Green-Blue Economy Strategy and Action Plan, the transition to a green-blue economy in the OECS requires an enabling economic and socio-political governance framework that promotes a reordering of current public and private sector resources from the traditional business as usual brown economy to the new sustainable, climate resilient, people-centered, economically empowering development model. This Green-Blue Growth Index will serve as a tool to measure how much our decisions and actions match our persuasion, or in other words, whether we are putting our money where our mouth is. I am Chamberlain Emmanuel, head of the OECS Environmental Sustainability Division, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar on assessing green-blue economy synergies in the OECS region with the Green Growth Index. I now welcome Dr. Christine Deason, Gggi's Caribbean representative, to present some opening remarks. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. And congratulations to everyone on the recent 40th anniversary of the OECS, which is a great accomplishment. I also want to thank my colleagues at the OECS Commission and at Gggi for the great collaborative work that's been done on this project so far. We've been working on this for a few months now and are really excited to share what we've done with you, with the member states, and to get your feedback. So first, I wanted to give a quick overview of Gggi for those who may not be familiar with our organization. So let me change the slide here. We are the Global Green Growth Institute. We are an international intergovernmental organization based in South Korea, focused on working with the governments of developing countries to promote environmentally sustainable, inclusive economic growth. We work on a membership basis, and currently we have 39 members, as you can see in the slide here. OECS became our first regional organization member in 2019, and now we have an office in St. Lucia at OECS Commission headquarters. By virtue of OECS's Gggi membership, we are now working with the Commission on several regional projects, including this one we're going to talk about today, several regional projects related to green growth, as well as bilaterally with several OECS member states on projects at the national level. Our current focus in the region is on climate change, climate finance, renewable energy, and green entrepreneurship. I'll go back to our agenda here and tell you a little bit of background about this project that we'll talk about today. In 2019, Gggi launched the Green Growth Index, which is a benchmarked composite index that measures a country's performance in achieving various sustainability targets, including the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, using 4 dimensions of green growth that we'll talk a little bit more about later. The index is intended to provide policymakers with a quantitative way to measure green growth performance, and it also includes a simulation tool that can be used for decision making, like Chamberlain mentioned. For example, in determining where to best allocate resources in order to meet countries' sustainability goals. I want to mention that a number of subject matter experts were instrumental in developing the index. This includes experts from the OECS region, and we are very grateful for their inputs. The project that we are discussing today developed from discussions last year between Gggi and the OECS Commission regarding the need to track and monitor various regional frameworks, including the OECS Green-Blue Economy Strategy, the updated St. George's Declaration, or SGD 2040, the Eastern Caribbean Oceanscape Plan, or ECROP, and the Biodiversity Framework. We concluded that the Green Growth Index would work well as a basis for monitoring these frameworks, but that it would need to be modified in order to fully cover all aspects of the green-blue economy that is so vital to small island countries, or as they are also sometimes called, large ocean countries. In parallel to this, we realized that some data was lacking for the OECS region in the original data set prepared when the Green Growth Index was initially calculated. So this brings us to the first two goals of the project, which are to incorporate the blue economy dimension into the Green Growth Index and to further gather data to allow full use of the index in the OECS region. There's also an aspect of the project related to the COVID pandemic and recovery from its economic impacts. Gggi is strongly recommending that all countries tie their COVID economic recovery plans to the green economy in order to enable a recovery that doesn't just reinstate the status quo, but rather transforms countries' economies to be more resilient, more fair and inclusive, and more environmentally sustainable than they were before, as well as to encourage innovation and create green jobs. In that vein, we are also using the Green Growth Index as a framework for advancing green COVID recoveries in the region. And one of my colleagues will discuss that in more detail later. Today, we'll be telling you more about the Green Growth Index and the Green Growth Simulation Tool and how they can be applied to a green-blue framework and to green recoveries. We hope that these will be useful tools both for the OECS Commission and for its member states in building strong, sustainable economies in the region, and we hope that you will want to join us in participating in the project as it moves forward. My colleagues will go into more detail during the presentations, but one of the initial goals of the project is to identify at least 2 OECS member countries that we can work with to collect data and pilot these frameworks in the region. So at the end of the webinar, we will talk more about how you can join us in that regard. Thank you very much, and back to you, Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Christine. And again, we want to reiterate the gratitude for Ggi's support in this regard and all the initiatives that we have ongoing. The OECS Commission is committed to completing and accelerating the regional integration project, and the one who has the mandate to lead this initiative, the director of our Economic Affairs and Regional Integration Division, Ms. Jacqueline Emmanuel Flood, will present a few brief remarks. Jackie, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chamberlain. Thank you, distinguished panelists, participants, and presenters. Thank you for having me here this morning, because it is indeed a pleasure to be here. The revised Treaty of Bastille, as you most of this knows, gives rise to this institution, the OECS Commission, mandates the Commission to support and promote sustainable development among our member states. The Global Green Growth Institute, which supports the OECS in developing this Green-Blue Growth Index for the region, is clearly in sync with this mandate. In subsequent presentations, I know that you will be allowed to have a deep insight into how this index is built. On the framework of the framework that is being used, the index, as you know, you will see, is built on the use of the SDG indicators to develop a composite index that can help our member states measure their performance in achieving sustainability targets in 4 interlinked green growth dimensions. These being efficient and sustainable resource use, natural capital protection, green economic opportunities, and social inclusion. Today's webinar on assessing the blue-green economy synergizes in the OECS the work that is being done with our OECS development strategy, and is therefore tremendously important on several levels. But permit me to focus on just 3 of those. The OECS has been pursuing a number of blue-green development initiatives in the region over the past decade, and only late last year we launched a Blue Bio Trade Initiative focusing on the development of a global value chain for Queen Kong. So it is very important that at this juncture that we need to pause and find the right approach to validate the many good development initiatives that we have been undertaking over the last decade, I would say. Secondly, the assessment is timely as we are embarking upon the joint implementation of the OECS development strategy. That strategy was also launched late in 2019 for a joint effort of the OECS Commission and the ECCB. As we are working towards developing a monitoring and implementation framework for this strategy, the work that we are doing now on this Gggi index is absolutely integrated and will make that work much more profitable, as the two initiatives, I think, really dovetail very well together. And thirdly, the Gggi index offers a fresh look at development accounting by shifting from the widely accepted view that economic growth cannot be reduced to a single-minded concentration on the current growth rate or the GDP, but it allows us to focus on improving the lives of the marginal and poor as well. Low-income groups and oppressed population are the essential targets of this development strategy. Thereby, it assists us in keeping the focus on the goal of poverty reduction, which in fact remains the most important sustainable development goal. While there has been broad acceptance of the limitations of the conventional growth measures, there have not been similar meeting of the minds on sustainable or suitable alternative measures. Therefore, the global recognition that potential negative impact of the fourth industrial revolution, and it can potentially increase social inequities and widen the gap between developed and developing countries. The small island states of the OECS have rebranded ourselves as large ocean and, as we say, big sea states. And therefore, we are looking towards the blue-green economy as our new frontier for development. This is where the Global Green Growth Institute, the Gggi, supports OECS in developing this green-blue growth index for the region. The index, as I said, is built on the global index that they are in fact customized and made applicable to our situation here, as you will see in subsequent presentation. It is therefore very important to us to support this initiative, as it is fixed on our goals, and it will help us in the efficient and sustainable resource use, natural capital protection, allow us to harness green economic opportunities, and to promote social inclusion, as I have said before. The OECS has defined the green blue economy as an economically viable, climate resilient economy that is based largely on sustainable domestic production and inward investment, and pursues long-term prosperity for its entire population. In particular, as I have said, the most vulnerable. Much of the work in defining this development approach has been integral to the formulation of the OECS development strategy. And the strategy, the strategy is an explicit articulation of the common strategies that OECS economic member states intend to pursue over a 10-year period. And it has been developed on these three critical pillars: generating economic growth, promoting human and social well-being, sustainable use of natural endowments. In regard to Pillar 1, member states have agreed that the economic growth to be generated should be at a level that allows for meaningful reduction in the persistent high rates of unemployment that continues to fatigue member states. A targeted reduction in the rate of unemployment, of over 1/4 is what we are looking for to achieve within the growth period that is envisaged. The main objective of Pillar 2 is to improve the quality of life of every citizen of the OECS territory through equitable and easy access to quality social services, including health, education, social protection. The focus of engagement will be on the specific life experiences of vulnerable groups, especially through a wide-ranging measure that address the identified gaps in the existing human development systems and policies. And the third pillar is founded on a vision of sustained, inclusive, and sustainable socioeconomic growth that supports the livelihood and aspiration of present and future generations of OECS citizens. The OECS development strategy seeks to promote and maintain environmental integrity while supporting enhanced growth, productivity, social equity, resilience, and adaptive capacity. The focus of interventions will be on integrating environment sustainability into social and economic development and realizing fuller stakeholder ownership, both public, private sector, and the citizenry, and their participation in the management of the process. Having said all this, I think I have convinced you that we are very confident and pleased that the ODS, our OECS development strategy, is well aligned with the defined Gggi green growth approach and the development index that we are embarking upon. In conclusion, therefore, I would like to state that the Economic Affairs and Regional Integration Division fully embraced this initiative and looks forward to participating in it throughout the entire process. We also will be happy to facilitate and be part of the capacity building and the application of the simulation tool that we see that is going to be used in assessing SDG co-benefits from green policies and investment. There's a lot to learn in this important and exciting development journey that we have embarked upon. And I wish to thank the GGI team, the presenters, and especially we, the participants, for supporting and participating in this initiative. Together, collectively, we are the builders of a better life for the OECS people. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Gggi, for that, for your remarks here. And certainly, this is a platform for helping to break down the silos and ensuring that there is that seamless integration between the economic, the social, and the environmental. So thank you for this and for the work that you lead. At this time, as we've just ended the formal segment, I would like to again welcome all participants. I just came through the participants list and I see we have a very healthy cohort attending from across our member states and other agencies. Welcome. We invite you to, feel free to use the chat, introduce yourself in our chat, and also if you have any general comments. If you have a specific question, we invite you to use the Q&A box. So there's a Q&A box at the bottom. If you would like a question to be addressed during the discussion segments, you can begin to post them from now so that we can queue them up and we will respond to you both in text and may respond verbally. So feel free, let's interact and let's make this as useful as possible. As we go further, we will also invite you to interact further through some other tools. So at this moment, we roll up our sleeves and go into the meat of the matter. And as you can see from our agenda, we're looking at now the introduction to the Green Growth Index, simulation tool, and website. I'd like to invite from Gggi, first of all, Dr. Lilibeth Acosta, who's the program manager for the initiative, to do her first presentation at this time. And as I said, as she presents, feel free to post your comments and questions. Welcome, Lilibeth.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Hello to everyone. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to present here the Green Growth Index and the simulation tool. And this presentation will be jointly made by myself and my colleague, Simon. So this is the outline of our presentation. First, I would like to give you a brief background on the Green Growth Performance Program, or GGPM for short. And then we will give you a description of the Green Growth Index and simulation tool before describing to you what are the next steps for developing the OECS Green Blue Growth Index and how can you participate to support the development of this index and the simulation tool. For the GGPM, as Christine already mentioned to you, we have already published the first Global Green Growth Index in 2019, but we have started developing it already in 2017. We conducted lots of workshops and consultations with experts, and there are over 25 international experts who are also co-authors in our Global Green Growth Index. And we have over 100 experts participating in the annual review of the Green Growth Index. Since last year, we also started collaborating with regional organizations like the African Development Bank and the Oecs Commission to apply the Green Growth Index at the regional level. And last year, we have started developing the online tool for the simulation of the Green Growth Index. The aim of the simulation tool is to support the assessment of SDG co-benefits in low emission development strategies, in NDCs, or for Green Deal or recovery. So another colleague will talk a bit more about the green recovery in the next presentation. GGI's approach for developing index is very participative and inclusive. When we developed the Global Green Growth Index, we conducted 4 regional workshops for the MENA region, for Latin America and Caribbean, for Africa and Asia Pacific. And we would like to use the same approach in developing the OECS Green Blue Growth Index. This is exactly why we have invited you to participate in this seminar. In addition to that, when developing the regional index, we are also being guided by the policy frameworks, which are available already in the region. Some examples of these are those being developed by the OECS Commission, specifically the SGD 2040. Now, let me give you a detailed background on the Green Growth Index. The Green Growth Index has 4 green growth dimensions: efficient and sustainable resource use, green economic opportunities, social inclusion, natural capital protection. Please remember these 4 green growth dimensions, because we will go back to these words or terms every now and then in this presentation. The selection of the indicators for these 4 green growth dimensions has been guided by 4 interlinked concepts. These are low carbon economy, resilient society, ecosystem health, and inclusive growth. We defined Green Growth Index as a measure of a country performance in achieving sustainability targets in SDGs, Paris Climate Agreement, and Aichi biodiversity targets for 4 green growth dimensions. So the index will have a score of between 1 and 100. If a country has a score of 100 for a particular indicator, it means that country has already achieved the target. For example, the target for share of forest to total forest area or total land area should be 17%. If a country has already achieved 17% forest area to total land area, then the score of that country will be 100. So most of the indicators that we have included in the Green Growth Index are already taken from SDG indicators, 64% as of now, but we aim to include the more indicators from SDG databases in the coming years. This is the reason why we are evaluating or reviewing the indicators on the Green Growth Index every year through the online consultations with international expert group as well as experts from different parts of the world. So let's take a look a bit on the different indicators that we have so far now for the Green Growth Index. For the natural capital protection, the one below in yellow, we have 12 indicators. For efficient and sustainable resource use, only 8 indicators. Ideally, they should have the same number of indicators. But as I said, some of the indicators that we would like to include, the data availability is still very limited. And so we are still waiting until the data improves. For the efficient and sustainable resource use, all the indicators are from SDGs except for sustainable land use. There are no relevant SDG indicators as of now for land use. But these indicators that we have here are published by FAO, and FAO is very much involved in developing SDG indicators. And so we expect that these 2 indicators will be added to the list of SDG indicators in the future. For natural capital protection, except for tourism and recreation in coastal and marine areas, all these indicators are already part of the SDG database. For green economic opportunities, you see, we only have 4 indicators so far. This is the most challenging part of developing the Green Growth Index. You will not be able to find lots of green economic opportunities indicators because this is a very new concept. And there is no single indicator from the SDG database that linked to green economic opportunities. But we hope that in the future, by working with international experts, that some of these indicators will be included in the future. For the social inclusion, this is the most easy part because there are lots of indicators in the SDG database, except for inequality in income and the gender equal pay. Most of these indicators, or all of these indicators, are already in the SDG database. But as we try to improve the Green Growth Index, more indicators will be included at the regional and country application of the Green Growth Index. And this is exactly what we would like to inform to you during this presentation. We have already a very developed website for the Green Growth Index, so you will find there the documentations that we have and all the analysis that we have published for the Green Growth Index in the year 2020 and also 2019. We also have all the experts, details of the experts who are working with us in developing the Green Growth Index. But most importantly, we have a dedicated webpage for the interactive index and simulation tool. And I would like to invite my colleague, Simon, to show to you how the current webpage for the index look like.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon. I work with Lilibeth, and today I will be presenting to you the interface of the Green Growth Index. Are you able to share my to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So, as detailed earlier, the goal of the Green Growth Index is to assess how an economy, how a country is performing, not only by economic growth, but through the scope of different dimensions. In order to make those analyses readily accessible, we have developed in-house a modern interface to interact with this index. This way, all the policymakers, all the interested persons and people can have a look at the index and interact with it. If you go on the Green Growth Index website, which we will share the link to, you can access to the index and simulation tab. And there you will have plenty of information about the Green Growth Index. When you will arrive on the website, this is the first thing that you will observe. This is the global overview, the map of the Green Growth Index from 2005 to 2019. You will see we have a very high number of countries already available in all continents. If you zoom onto the Eastern Caribbean region, you will see that there is no scores available yet, and we will discuss that in just a moment. All the scores are also available here in a table that you can search and sort to look for the country that you're interested in. You can have a quick look at all different regions to get familiarized with the index and how it works. So here you can see, for example, the trends of the index over time for the 5 continents. You can have a more broken down detail for the different dimensions that Lilibeth mentioned: natural capital protection, social inclusion, green economic opportunities, and efficient resource use, all color-coded here, and you can see how the different trends evolve. Finally, the index is built on a lot of indicators. We have 16 indicator categories that you can have a look here, at here for the different regions. Now, the most interesting part of this platform is that you can have a look directly at the country profiles. I will show you with the example of France here, and later we will go to another example. First of all, if you look at the very left of my screen, you can see a wheel here, a circular bar plot that represent the distances to the SDG target. That's very important, is that the Green Growth Index is not just random aggregation of number, it's benchmark against the SDG targets. So it's really helpful to get a good picture out how the country is performing relative to the SDG targets. So here, for example, in this case for France, you can look at one of the dimensions here, social inclusion, for example, gender balance. France has a score of 92, which is fairly good. If you go to the green trade, for example, it's much, much lower, and there is much improvement to be made on that dimension. You can have a look at the trend of the index over time and compare it to the average of similar countries. Finally, you can also look at sort of similar information than this circular plot, but as different bar plots here to compare it to the average of different countries. So for example, looking at the right plot, 2019 indicator, we can see, for example, that France, in terms of efficient and sustainable resource use, is slightly lower than the European average. Now, as I said before, for the member of the OECS countries, we do not have all the data necessary to compute the index. And that's something that's really important for this project. So for example, if we go to St. Lucia here, you can see that the index is not available. Here you can see it's a NA, or not applicable, right? But we still have a lot of dimension computed. So while we don't have the full Green Growth Index picture, we still have a number of indicators that are available for the member country. So here, for example, in this case, you can see we have all the indicators on social inclusion, the pink one, and all the indicators on natural capital protection. This is why, as Lilibeth will detail later, we're also working on the green-blue growth economic index to include indicators that are more related to the precise situation of the Eastern Caribbean states. Very quickly, 2 last features of this interface are the possibility to compare 2 countries by pairs. So here, for example, you can compare France and Germany, and you can look at a lot of different countries. So for example, if you want to compare Greece and, for example, Hungary, for example, you could also compare those 2 countries. Naturally, this index works well for countries that have a very high very good data coverage. So the results are more relevant, naturally, for countries with more data. Finally, the last feature of this interface is that we're trying to build the index very transparently, to build trust into the index and not to just throw out just numbers that come out of thin air. So all the data that are used to compute this index are available within the interface and are 100% traceable. So you have a proper description of what the indicator means. You have a description of its unit, exactly how it's expressed, and you have information about its source and where it comes from. And all the data is available for a lot of countries naturally. So for example, we can add Synclusion here for the plot, and we can compare the trend for example, for France and Germany. And like so, we can do it for a number of indicators. So this is the first part of the presentation of the interface. I will now give the floor back to Lilibeth to introduce the second part of this interface, which is the green growth simulation tool.
Thank you very much, Simon. So let me share to you again my screen. Okay, so let me just go to that part. Okay, so let's talk now about the simulation tool, keeping in mind that simulation tool is developed to link to the green growth index. So you will see again the different indicators or dimensions that I mentioned in the first part of my presentation in this presentation. So how do we develop the simulation tool? So what Simon will show you in the next part of his presentation will be the global online tool. We have already developed several models that are relevant to different sectors, but some of the models cannot be added because of missing data. That means we cannot find global data for many indicators to apply the models. So we park those models. We park those models and apply them for the country simulations. So this is exactly what we're doing now in phase 2 of the development of simulation tool, which started this year. So we are applying to several countries, and the lessons learned in the application at the country level will then again feed back to the further improvement of the global online tool, which will then start again next year. So this is an iterative process. And probably for those of you who are familiar with modeling, you usually start with some models which are validated and clear, and then start developing that over time. Especially this is a challenging task for the Green Growth Index because we have different systems to model in the simulation tool. These systems include waste or material use, water, land, and energy. So the Green Growth Simulation tool is made of many system dynamics models for these different systems. And these systems are interlinked. And because they are interlinked, we call them dynamic. And another source of dynamics in the simulation tool is, of course, the time element. So we are doing simulation until 2050. So how can the simulation tool measure co-benefits on SDGs? It's because the model outputs from the simulation tool are the changes in the values of the indicators of the Green Growth Index. And the model inputs are policy measures or green investments. And this can be related to climate actions like LEDs and NDCs or green recovery. Here are some examples of policy measures. And some of them are relevant for a specific set of SDGs. Of course, a specific policy measure cannot address all the SDG targets, right? But we will be able to trace some impacts of policy measures to different SDGs. So I will not talk too much about this because of lack of time, but if there will be further questions, I will be happy to answer them. This is a very simple schematic diagram of the simulation tool. The boxes below represent the different indicators of the Green Growth Index. The diagrams on the top represent the different models of the different systems in the simulation tool. So what the simulation tool will do is that you can input specific policy measures for energy, for water, for land, or even for material use. But the impact of these policy measures will cascade into the different dimensions of green growth. And this is what we call co-benefits. The country-level application for 2021 with respect to Green Deal or Green Recovery will be applied in countries including Hungary, Senegal, and hopefully 2 selected countries in OECS. And for the application of the simulation tool for climate actions, specifically LEDs, we are applying it in Burkina Faso and Ethiopia this year. Okay, so let me invite again Simon to show to you the simulation tool for the global application.
All right, so let me quickly share my screen. I just have
Simon, you're muted. Okay.
I don't think he's muted, but we're not hearing him.
Okay, I think it's just starting again. Okay, while waiting, let me just maybe
right. Sorry, I'm back. Sorry about this problem. Hopefully you can hear me now.
yes, very clear.
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, sorry, really sorry about that. So the goal of the Green Growth Index is to have a diagnostics, and the goal of the simulation tool is to really assess the impact and how we can change these diagnostics in the future through system dynamics modeling. What we're building is really a collection of models that are interlinked together. So we are all building them in-house with the help of a very talented expert in our team. The model that we're developing naturally are not do not come from thin air, but they are all sourced from peer-reviewed literature and well-renowned articles naturally. If you go on the online interface, you can have a look at what those models look like. Once again, on the Index and Simulation tab, if you go here on the model overview, you can have an overview of the different models. The way the interface is presented may be a little bit not very transparent at first, but it's because there's a lot of information to display. We have models for different sectors, such as land use, water, transport, and one called green growth, which I will mention later. If you go into transport, we can have an example of the model that we currently have in the interface about transport intensity. For each model, we have a written English description of what the model do to make it clear exactly what the model do, because sometimes it's not always obvious. And we also have the source of where this model was found. And then what you can see on the right here is a graphical representation of the mathematical model. So instead of displaying pages and pages of equations, we decided to present it that way to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So for example, you can go over different nodes and you will see here that you have access to the full name of the variable instead of those scary acronyms, I would say. So for example, here you can see that GDPC is the GDP per capita, for example. It's very interactive because you can click on the different variables. So for example, if you click on GDP here, you will have more information about this variable. You will know the full name, you will know the unit, and you will know what this variable impacts. So here it's a very small model, but when we look at the full green growth model that we currently have, we can see that it's much larger model with a lot of different variables. So it's pretty data intensive, but at least we're covering many different indicators. So for example, here in this case, we have the GDP covered here, selected, and we can see that the GDP is going to impact, for example, the vehicle ownership rate. It's also going to impact the water use efficiency and, for example, the share of freshwater withdrawal to freshwater availability. And we can do like so for a lot of different variables, for example, the cropland demand, which will impact naturally the water use efficiency, the share of forest area, and all types of emissions. So this is to make the model transparent. At the bottom of this page, you have the actual equations that are used in the models with all the different variables. So you can see we have a lot of different data here and a lot of different equations, but I'm sure it's rather interesting for you to have a look at this. You can naturally download here the summary table to get the full equations and variables into a simple Excel format rather than through this interface. The goal of these models is to assess quantitatively, so not just by looking at how different models interact with each other, but really looking at how the system behaves depending on the assumptions that we have. Here we have 4 different models. So we can look, for example, at the agricultural emission model. So this model essentially computes all the different emissions that can be caused by livestock, essentially. It was developed, peer-reviewed. It was developed by the FAO, and we implemented it with thanks to a colleague called Herman in-house. In this model, there's a lot of different parameters, but naturally, you can imagine that when dealing with livestock, the way manure is handled is very important. So we have, for example, policy scenarios on how to handle manure. So for example, if you implement policies that will impact manure, you can like so impact and change those different inputs. And you can do so for 2 different scenarios to compare them. Naturally, another very big impact depends on what kind of animal population you have. Is it cattle? Is it chicken? Is it different? And here we have 12 of those different animal population available. So for example, we can reduce the number of cattle that are exploited in this economy. And then finally, we can choose a country here to run the simulation onto. So we have a lot of different countries. Not all of them are available. It really depends on the data. So for the sake of this example, I will simply do it on this country. If we run it after a couple of seconds, the results will appear into interactive visualization. So here you can see that everything is color-coded. The blue is the scenario 2 and the beige is the scenario 1. The size of the boxes is proportional to the amount of emission. So we've seen that by reducing, for example, the number of cattle, we've drastically reduced the non-CO2 emissions. The results here are displayed in gigatons of CO2 equivalent, for example. The gray box is the business as usual scenario. So this is the scenario that ideally we want to do better than this. All the plots are interactive, so you can click on it here, for example, to really understand in all of your animal population who's emitting what. So here we can see, for example, that the cattle dairy is still emitting a large amount of CO2. Here at the bottom, we have another visualization where you can see the flows of gas emission, depending on the source and depending on the type of emissions. You can have a deeper look at this on your own. It's a small presentation, so it's just here to give you the idea. And we have that for different models. So at the moment, we have 4 models included, but we have many more in the pipelines that will be included later. And an important point of this presentation is that here we're presenting the global application, and that since we're developing everything in-house, both the interface and integrating the model as well in-house, we can have a high level of flexibility to really adapt the model to the specific needs of each country. So for the moment, it's only global application. So we look at readily available data, but if more data is available, we can do a lot of different things. So here, for example, a final scenario that we can do on the GDP growth, for example, we can set a maximum amount of vehicle in circulation in an economy. So this can be set, for example, by policy. If you ban, for example, cars in from downtown, you will by de facto set a limit on the number of vehicle ownership rate that you have. And you can also change, for example, the gross domestic product per capita. And you can run a scenario like that and observe the different results through simple line plots. Since we're running a little bit out on time, I will give the floor back to Lilibeth to conclude on this tool.
Thank you very much, Simon. So let me just go back again to my presentation and share to you the last part, and which I think is the most important part, and the part where we really need your support for this project. So what you see here is the data gaps for the OECS. So it ranged from 25% for St. Lucia to as high as 86% for Montserrat. So this is the total missing indicators in the Green Growth Index. And because of this, we were not able to compute score for the Green Growth Index for any countries in OECS. So if we will be able to get support from you to trace how we can fill this gap in the data, then we will not only improve the index at the global level for the OECS countries, but also help build the OECS Green-Blue Growth Index. So for the Green-Blue Growth Index, one important part where we can improve the blue economy indicators will be in the dimension of green-blue economic opportunities. So I have highlighted here some of the possible indicators that we can add. And another area where we can improve the OECS Green-Blue Index is to add a dimension on enabling environment, because the ability of a region or a country to, of course, implement a green growth transition is to have an enabling and good enabling environment for the different sectors. And the development of the enabling environment is supported by using the progress measures indicators of the SGD 2040. And so we have already a working paper suggesting how this can be framed, and we will share this working paper to you in the next weeks to evaluate or to review. So what are the next steps for developing the OECS Green-Blue Growth Index? So this is the first step, the webinar 1, but there will be a series of webinars coming up also in August as well as in October to update you on the activities of the project. And we will also like to identify the expert and the possible role in the development of the index, and hopefully we will finalize this in July. There will be several online consultations to collect feedback from experts, and of course, we will have data collection and validation with the support from local consultants and from interested government partners, and of course, model development, implementation of models for the index and the tool, similar to what we have shown you online, and of course, the preparation of the reports for the index and tool. And so these are some just details of what we envision for webinar 2 and 3 and the timeline for that. And of course, importantly for July, we will get in touch with you if you are interested to work with us in terms of identifying indicators and collecting the data. And so with this, Simon and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And maybe during the question and answer, we can also do a little bit of Menti. So if you go to menti.com, just type this in your computer or in your mobile phone, and please use the code 31497135, and then you will find this question, and then we will see your answers at some point. So back to you, Chamberlain. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lilibeth and Simon. That was really, really informative, both giving us the overview and delving into the details, so we can be truly reliable that, this is really based on sound science and linked, as you said repeatedly, to the SDGs. And so we have a few questions here, and again, want to thank you both, as well as the extended panel we have. So we have a team from Gggi, we have colleagues from the OECS, both the Economic Affairs Division and our Environment Division who are on. So welcome, colleagues. And we have a few questions. As we are going through the questions, as Lilibeth indicated, we want you to please interact with us by going to the Mentimeter link. The link has been posted in the chat, or you can go to mentimeter.com and the code 3149715, 3149715, and you can respond while we interact. So first question we have here from Laverne Queely, which says, it has been said that the indicators were selected utilizing the SDGs indicators. Work has been undertaken by CARICOM in collaboration with UN ECLAC in consultation with planners and statisticians in the region to identify indicators relevant to the region which will be monitored. Was this information used in the development of the index for the OECS, or will it be used? And which are the members of CARICOM, or the, I suppose, initially the OECS region, which would benefit from this process? So question, who wants to try this one out?
Maybe I can give a quick answer to that. Yes, we were actually very happy to know that UN ECLAC has been helping the OECS to improve their databases, including the SDGs. So we are actually starting to, with the support of the OECS Commission, we have already requested for a meeting with the UN ECLAC, with the potential partner with them, so we can work together to fill in the gaps in the data. But of course, this is the first also webinar where we are also trying to inform the participants. If you would like to support us, and if you know any agencies or experts who can fill in the gaps in the data and whatever indicators that are still relevant to include in the Green-Blue Growth Index, then we are very welcome for any support that you can give.
Okay, wonderful. Just before I continue, I think there's a correction to the code. So in the chat, it's 31497135. Okay, we were missing the 3, so it's 31497135. Yes, Gail, Dr. Archibald, who leads our stats unit, please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Chamberlain. Good morning, participants, and Gail Archibald. Gail Archibald, I'm head of the Statistical Development Program here at the OECS Commission. On the question of the SDGs and the CARICOM core set of indicators, certainly the SDG framework does allow countries and regions to identify a set of indicators that are relevant to their context, but it also allows countries and regions to localize and regionalize the indicators, SDG indicators. So while there may be, for example, 109 CARICOM indicators, they may not all be applicable to all the CARICOM countries. And because the OECS countries are also themselves part of a sub-region for this, this discussion. We also have to select indicators that are relevant to the OECS region and are also responding to the requirements of the treaty. So again, the thing about data, the starting point is always the national development. So a country would not be expected to pursue, for example, a tourism competitive index if tourism is not important to their national context. So if the starting point is national development, as we heard this morning in the presentations, the requirement for countries is to mainstream the SDGs into the national planning, mainstream vulnerability index, mainstream the GGI index, and not to pursue data collection as, oh, we're collecting data for GGI or we're collecting data for vulnerability index, but that the data that are collected, data are reusable, statistics are reusable, so that the data that are collected can be used to construct those indicators for the sectors that we mentioned earlier, economic, social, and environment. So I just wanted to point out that yes, the CARICOM indicators are a base, but we also have added in another set of indicators, well, additional set of SG indicators that are also required for the OECS region. Thank you. Back to you, Chamberlain.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gail. And I think, Lilibeth, based on the question, I think we just need to clarify that this process of customizing the index for the OECS is just started. So we have not yet, so it's starting. And so there will be a series of consultation and consideration of all of those relevant data as we go forward. Okay. All right. So the next question, I have a couple there from Antigua and Barbuda, Mr. Bailey. Well, one, please distinguish between this concept of index and that of the sustainable production and consumption, with examples where possible. Is that the GGI? Is it that the GGI is a measurement supporting mechanism? So I think so. That's the first question here, and I could probably just state the second one. Says, given the experience thus far with this application or model, what has been some of the potential implications for the development of national budgets and government organizational structures? More specifically, the implications for agriculture development going forward, given the fact that this sector is significantly data starved, I think as one of the presentations indicated earlier. So Mr. Bailey is actually director from Antigua and Barbuda of Agriculture, so you could understand his concern in that regard. So the first one, in terms of just clarifying here the difference between this index, okay, and that of sustainable production and consumption, or is there really a difference? And the second issue is understanding the issue of lack of data availability, especially for agriculture. What are some of the implications for the consideration of this index in developing national budgets and government structures?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very interesting questions. So first, on the concept of sustainable consumption and production, as you have seen, the Green Growth Index has a very comprehensive framework, and it has these 4 green growth dimensions. Actually, this concept of sustainable production and consumption is embedded in the Green Growth Index. So, but it's not also, but we cannot, of course, call it a index for production and consumption only, because it covers lots of other dimensions that are important for green growth, which including, for example, the social inclusion. So it's always, it just depends on how actually you try to navigate on what kind of index and indicators that you will include into your measurement of green growth transition. So as we said several times during the presentation, for the development of OECS Green Blue Growth Index, we are still in the very first stage of developing it. And so what you think are important, particular, not only for the regional level, but for your own country, we definitely be able to consider them, especially in the application of the simulation tool, because now this is really on a country level. In terms of relation or implication to budgeting, most likely the area that we can see is what the index or what the simulation tool can tell you is on which sector, will most likely investment or actions will be needed in order to support green growth transition.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. And I suppose it gives policymakers and technocrats, a sort of a view of what's happening, so that we can make those decisions about, where resources should be focused if we are serious about achieving that balance of true.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly, Chamberlain. That's why the simulation tool is for building scenarios. So you can try different scenarios and see what will be the implications of that. If you talk about budget, then that will be investments, right? And so what will be the implication of these different investment in terms of the different targets that you would like to achieve?
Yes, and I really love that double, use of it, that you can see where you are, but you can also, design your own future through the scenarios. So that is really excellent. Okay, we have one more question here. It says, that's from Laurie Ray. Is there, or asking essentially for clarity of definitions, right, to ensure that the results are consistent and comparable across countries. So, in different spaces, different words mean different things. So whether you talk about slums, safely managed water, so does the site or the resource provide clear definitions, so we show what we're talking about?
Yes, very, very good question as well. That's why in our publication, if you check our website, we provided all the information about the indicators, the sources, and the definition. Even if they are coming from the SDG indicators, we have a brochure explaining what are these indicators all about, the sources, and what even the limitations of indicators are explained there, because we really know that these different indicators could mean different things to different experts.
Yes, excellent, excellent. Well, I think we've exhausted the questions so far, so we will move to the next and final presentation, and then we'll come back for another round of questions. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Diane Quezada. I hope I pronounced it right, Diane, who's a senior officer at Gggi, who will look at the green recovery application of the index and tool in the context of COVID and recovery co-benefits. So over to you.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Okay, so I will share my screen now. Okay, I hope you can see it well now.
Yes.
So thank you. In the interest of time, I will go a little bit faster. So this presentation basically will tell you how we are going to support the green recovery efforts of each of the OECS member countries in order to develop a green recovery strategy for a long-term economic recovery. As you know, the UNDP already stated that Latin America and the Caribbean region will experience the most severe economic recession in over decades, compared to even other regions. The Caribbean and in general Latin America, it's in risk of losing at least 2 decades of progress in achieving the SDGs, as well as their climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts are going to be delayed. And we know that COVID-19 struck in a time when the Caribbean countries were still recovering from past natural disasters. They were they had high sovereign debt levels, and they have low tax revenues. So far, that's why it is so important for the Caribbean countries to structure their recovery plans highly aligned with their fiscal, social, and environmental objectives and priorities. And moreover, they need to have a sense of how the fiscal policy response, combined with new sources of financing, can unlock a sharp recovery and can pave the way towards a green long-term economic recovery. So in line with that, I will present to you the projects and activities that Gggi will develop to support the Caribbean's green recovery and how it links with the index that Lilibet just presented. So a quick overview of what is happening in the OECS. So basically, we observed not only the Caribbean, but overall in any country, 3 stages of recovery: immediate, medium term, and long term. And within these stages, we observe different implications towards sustainability and a green and blue economy. For example, we can see that during the initial lockdown and during the initial stroke of COVID, the immediate responses were directed towards rescue and relief measures. And that's totally fine. However, we see that these rescue measures were not linked to any green conditions, for example, and sometimes urgency lead to climate harmful actions in some countries. We also saw that, for example, with the disruption in supply chains, especially for energy, we realized that green assets were more resilient to any shocks than carbon intensives, particularly in the energy and transport sectors. Once we move towards the medium term stage of recovery, we see that capital towards green projects started to increase. And that means capital were available, but somehow the stream down of capital was not available for all countries. Basically because most of developing countries do not have a pipeline of projects ready to be financed. They have to think about it a little bit more than other countries, but the capital was there. And then we saw that countries started to invest directly to promote in the most hard-hit economic sectors, and also in the sectors that have the highest climate impact. And in the Caribbean, for example, we saw tourism. In other countries, we saw transport, we saw energy sectors being increasingly invested in. And now we are observing that countries are moving towards developing the long-term recovery strategies with a vision of changing their economic performance and the way their economy works. And most Latin American countries are precisely looking into how to develop a green and blue-based economy. And here we observed that the main issue is the lack of fiscal space to actually finance the recovery. And most likely, the over-indebted countries will need debt reliefs to fight climate change. And in the Caribbean, we have been looking to debt for climate swaps and other innovative financing mechanisms. And also, we now observe that green conditions are being attached to debt reconstructing to shape into climate change action. So what we look into the long-term strategies are 3 main points. First of all, that the economic stimulus packages are more and more aligned to their national climate policies to drive a long-term transformation. And this basically allows countries to attract more capital because investors see that there is a congruent flow in terms of priorities and government perspective, so they increase their willingness to invest. Second, countries are still targeting very focused towards activities that are job creation or that have high multipliers of job creation. They promote sustainability and resilient systems. So basically what the governments are looking for is to maximize revenues to ensure fiscal viability and minimize borrowing and debt. And some of the policies that we see here are exactly the same that we saw in the first stage of rescue. For example, supporting SMEs, emergency transfers for basic incomes into households, but now we see they are linking it more towards sustainability criteria. And finally, what we observe is that countries are trying to include all the financial actors in order to mobilize finance for recovery. And this means that they are involving development financial institutions and multilateral development banks, so they can lead dialogues with the private sector and mobilize private capital. And they are more focusing on crowding in private finance through blended finance. So a quick research into the long-term recovery plans from the OEC members. Basically, we observed that some countries already have their plans, some of them not, and some of them have some sort of a guideline based on the credits, for example, from the World Bank. We can observe that the target sectors in those long-term recovery plans are basically increasing healthcare systems or developing safety networks, sustainable tourism, basically because it's the main primary economic activity, then bioeconomy and ecosystem services, which is basically agriculture and fisheries, and construction or public infrastructure. And some countries are leaving aside, for example, circular economy, sustainable mobility, and digital revolution, which are sectors that are being targeted by other developing countries and should also be considered. So knowing that, how can GGI's knowledge and development efforts can support the OEC's members to develop these resilience and recovery plans? So first of all, from one side, we are working together with Vivid Economics to use their Greenness of a Stimulus Index to map GGI members, and this includes all OEC's member partners. And this index basically helps us to identify and recommend measures for improving the effectiveness of the COVID-19 responses. And it will map how green the green recovery are. This assessment will provide recommendations, like specific recommendations to the countries on how to improve their policies and their COVID-19 responses, and how they compare against other similar countries. So far, this index, if you review it right now, it's mostly composed of developed countries, and that's exactly what we're doing. We are incorporating developing countries and small island states, so we can make a fair comparison and provide recommendations precisely to all these countries that have very limited fiscal space for green recovery. And then, as Lilibet mentioned, we are linking green recovery with the GGI index. And basically what we are doing is we are linking green recovery tools such as the Greenness of a Stimulus Index or the Oxford Recovery Tool, and we are taking the recommendations of both the index and the GEI and the green recovery tools in order to provide an assessment of how the recovery can be greened in terms of the 4 pillars of green growth, either efficient and sustainable resources, social inclusion, natural capital, and green economic opportunities. We have done this assessment already in countries, for example, like in Peru and Mexico. And it can be either a very high level assessment or it can be a very detailed assessment country by country. Additionally, Gggi supports the green recovery efforts across the value chain. We normally look into just transition and employment. We look into the economic sectors that will provide the highest number of jobs, and the economic sectors that the country is ready to develop, basically on the level of education and skills of the population. We support countries to align their national planning to their green recovery efforts, and we look into their financial plans and how to mobilize or how to finance the green recovery mechanisms. And of course, we support the development of thematic projects, whether in agriculture or transport and energy mostly. And across all that, we have a green sustainable entrepreneurship program. Just to give you an idea, currently Gggi is supporting 13 members with different green recovery projects. And not all of them are using the index, for example, but they also have like this initial assessment of, okay, how's your recovery looking and how can you improve it? And we have had some publications about it, which you can find online. So the next steps to move forward on the assessment for the OECS member countries, it's to basically validate all your fiscal and policy measures in order for green recovery, and to be inputted either in the Greenness of a Stimulus Index and to be compared with the Gggi index results. And we will obviously keep in touch with you for these next steps. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Diana. That was very insightful and comprehensive. And in fact, I know we have our participants keenly tuned because the validation has begun. We have St. Kitts and Nevis. Laverne is already indicating that circular economy and renewable energy and the matter of mobility, sustainable mobility, are priorities for St. Kitts and Nevis, and it was not ticked in that matrix, so we'll have to note that. Again, we will invite further validation as we move forward. So, Laverne, I guess you've noted that, and I think you said you may have a follow-up accordingly. But while we wait, well, Kristen has posted the link to the evaluation form. We're not yet done, but just in case some persons have to leave, if you can please do the evaluation so that we can get your feedback and be able to ensure we are meeting your expectations as we move forward. We have a question here which I consider the elephant in the room, right? From Laurie Ray, which is on data. Okay, so given the nature of the tool and the index, it can be seen that this is a data intensive undertaken. Discussions therefore needs to be given to strengthening the national statistical systems and in turn the national statistical offices who are at the center of data collection, analysis, and dissemination in countries. This ensures a repository for data. Has there been any best practice experiences as it relates to countries whose data systems were robust enough as it relates to data provision? So I'm sure Lilibeth and your team, you could probably speak to any good practices based on where you've done this before, and probably Gail, you want to give some further insights on the situation in the region, or where we may be able to fill some gaps.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, so this is always a very interesting question when it comes to developing the index and the tool in terms of data. Well, we cannot really say best, probably in terms of the application of the simulation tool, because this is the first year that we will apply it. So we definitely cannot tell yet what are the best practices. But for the Green Growth Index, I think I can share with you some experience that we have for the countries who would really like to have their index score computed and published, so they can compare how they're performing with their other co-peers or peer countries. Example that I can give is the United Arab Emirates, because they're really very keen on to see how they're performing in terms of green growth and transition. So they have reached out to us for support. That is to know which of their government agencies is actually responsible for submitting the data to the international organizations, because the data in the SDGs are actually being published mostly by international organizations. So because most of the international organizations are our partners, and also there are experts who are members of our international expert group. So we reach out to them, and they contacted within their organizations to know who or which agency is responsible for providing that data. And so we were able to get that information, and then they were also able to provide us the information when the data submission is usually happening. And this is also very important for the responsible government agencies. And so we tried to link them, international organization and the responsible government agencies. And then they were able to fill in some of the gaps in terms of.
Okay, wonderful. Gail, you want to add anything?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to keep my camera off. I have a slight cough. Thank you, Chamberlain. And certainly, Laurie Ray, of course, who is the Chief Statistician in Anguilla Statistics Department, the role of the necessity for having a well-coordinated and integrated national statistical system is primary with any, improvement in.
Oh, we lost you there, Gail.
Yeah, can you still hear me?
We hear you now. We lost you for about 6 seconds.
So I think your internet connection is unstable, just came up. So I'm agreeing, I'm supporting Laurie Ray's point. And just to add to that, in some countries in our region, we have the statistical law, the national statistical law would have a provision for strengthening and ensuring coordination of recognize that the official and legal statistical authority does not have full responsibility of data collection for other areas. For example, environment, that would be the role of the Ministry of Environment, and it would be necessary for them to have a statistical function and a statistical unit that collects this data, and then, as Laurie Ray said, send this to the stats office so that there's a central repository of data. But it is a shared responsibility in countries through the NSS to have the data that are required for all the uses that are required. Thanks.
Okay, great. And certainly in the area of the environment, we have a bit of a coalition developing. We already collaborated with UNECLAC and the UN Statistical Division to help in the development of the Eastern Caribbean or the sub-regional environmental information system, piloting the area of climate and disaster data. So you will be hearing more of this as we go along in terms of the data collection, understanding the gaps and readily available data, and setting up a system for collection and sharing. Countries like St. Lucia has a fully functional national system. Antigua is advanced, but we want to have a regional system that could serve everyone. So more of this will be coming up because data is certainly a challenge in our region, but it is very important. So as we wrap up, I think it's important to indicate to participants, especially member states, what are the next steps, and if they want to participate, be consideration for the process, or be one of the countries of focus. What do they need to do? What's next? So.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. So the next steps is that we will be sending 2 working papers to the participants, and these are related to the OECS Green Blue Growth Index and Enabling Environment Dimension Indicators. So this is the first consultation that I talk about. And then there will be a survey that will guide, so an online questionnaire that will guide in terms of this consultation. So, all the participants for this webinar can join this online survey, and also if they have colleagues who they think can support this initiative, feel free to extend the invite for this consultation. So they will definitely hear from us or through the OECS about this next step.
Okay, wonderful. I know our next webinar happens in...
That's in August, but
in August? Yes.
Yeah, in July, there's online consultation. Right. So there are 2 activities. So one is the webinar where we can discuss again together, and the online consultations which will be all through, it could be in Google form online survey, it could be in email. So it will be more of other ways of communications. Okay,
wonderful. So consultations in July, webinar in August, and there are others coming along.
Yes.
Yes. So important. We're asking you, if you've not yet done the evaluation form, please do that, because we need to ensure we capture your data and your views, so we can probably interact with you. Kristen, do we have our Mentimeter results? We can do that now. As we post it, as I thank everyone who was on from our member states and beyond, our colleagues from Gggi, thank you so much, excellent presentations. Our colleagues from the Commission, thank you so much, Director Flood, Gail, and others who participated, and thank you for all those who were instrumental in pulling this together. All right, so we can see some results here from your response to the Mentimeter in terms of what support would you be able what support would you be able to provide to the project. And we have data and expertise, reviewing reports, and both. So we understand persons' capacity, both in terms of skills and availability. But again, as you fill in the evaluation, we'll get some more insight from you. And as we do the consultations, we'll be able to expand that even further. So our time is exhausted. I think we've accomplished our goal. So on behalf of the OECS Commission and the Global Green Growth Institute, thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you so much for your listening, your questions, and your participation, and for your future engagement. And we wish you a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Chamberlain.
Okay, thank you.